Imagine yourself, you're sitting in a restaurant in Los Angeles. A young person comes up to you and says, I want to be a script supervisor. What do you tell that person?
Do you mind being dirty? Do you mind being cold? Do you mind being hot? Do you mind being yelled at? Can you deal with a lot of egos? You are answerable to a lot of people, but nobody really knows what you do for your job. They don't know how you do it. And so you have to be a self-starter. And I always believe you need to have the spirit of being a service. You're going to be yelled at all the time by all kinds of people. You have camera guys who don't like you, producers who don't understand what you do. You'll have actors who sit in your chair, which is totally rude. You have to bend with all of this because nobody wants to know what your problem is. So if you can't be that person, then we're not even going to have this conversation. If the next step is, oh my God, I've got to do this job, I love it, then I say,
Welcome to Make the Donuts. I'm your host, Eric Sabiston. I'm a best-selling author, a dual-rated airline pilot, and a career counselor. I've helped over 8,000 people make the jump to the airlines. Now, I'm interviewing successful people from a variety of professions around the world. It's time to learn their secrets for success. Make the Donuts starts now. I'm so happy to have my good friend Susan Malerstein-Watkins, one of the greatest script supervisors in Hollywood. She's going to say she's not, but I promise you she's an amazing person, both on the set and off the set. So today we're going to find out what it takes to be a script supervisor in Hollywood. Susan, thanks for coming on the show.
thank you, it's my pleasure.
So how did you even get involved in this kind of line of work?
Well, I started out in theater, spent a number of years doing theater, both behind the stage and on the stage. And I was making some changes in my life, didn't really want to act anymore, didn't want to work in the theater. And I actually had a phone call to a friend of the family's, totally unrelated to anything with the business. But he was a producer in the business, and really from the technical side, I would say he didn't spend any time on the set. He was raising money, et cetera. I say that for a reason. I'm having this conversation with him about doing a favor for a friend. And at the end of the conversation, I said, by the way, Milt, I really was thinking I wanted to get into film. I don't think I can carry lights. I don't think I can carry, mag boxes. Those were the old days when we used film and everything was very heavy. And I thought, in marching band, I played the piccolo. I don't think so. So I was asking him, and he said, oh, Susie, you should be a script supervisor. It's a really easy job and you sit down a lot. And I know a friend who owes me a favor. I'm thinking, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So he calls his friend and he talked to her. She was kind enough to teach me. So she'd come over to the house once a week. We'd trade favors. In those days, I was also a manicurist, trying to make money as, an actress rather than waiting tables. So I'd give her a manicure, and then she'd give me a lesson. And she'd give me a whole bunch of homework. She'd go away for a week. She'd come back, did this for about 8 weeks. And then she said, Susie, you're on your own. Go to film schools, go to AFI, go to USC, put up the 3x5 cards on the direct boards, advertise, hey, script supervisor willing to do student films, which I did. I didn't even make it home after the first day, putting up the first card. I got my first job, and I've been doing it ever since. I think it's very different now, and for a lot of reasons. I mean, the obvious reason is digital, but I think the bigger issue is many kids now go to schools for it. When I started, I think there was one person teaching, maybe. I lucked out and got this wonderful lady named Betty Goldberg, who was kind enough to teach me. But I passed it on, and I continually taught for free, took interns on, had them work with me for most of my career. I wanted to give back, and I really enjoyed teaching, and I really thought the best way they could learn was also to be on the set, which I didn't have the advantage of. I was just thrown in, what do they call it, pan into the fire. But now there are a lot of different things. You can do it online. You can take some courses, I suspect. UCLA, some of the other schools sometimes have these short courses, et cetera. But the very best thing you can do is to start out by reading Pat Miller's book. She wrote a magnificent book that says really basically everything you need to know. Even if you're taking a class, I suggest that you read the book, or any other production books for that matter, so that you get a sense of what going on a set is like. But I'll tell you the thing that I did more than anything else, besides just teaching the basics to my students, I would have them on the set every day, spend a day with somebody in a different department. Monday, you're with the electricians. Tuesday, you're with the grips. Wednesday, spend the day with the sound guys. I wanted them to understand what every single person did on the set, because you're working as a team. You're interactive for every single thing that you do. You're dependent on how well they do their jobs and vice versa. And I want them, all of my students, I wanted them to respect every single job and to know everybody's name. I think there are a lot of ways you can learn, but I was lucky enough to have Betty Goldberg in my corner.
Well, that's interesting. So you can go to school for it now,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's still a lot of cross training, as we would call it in the military. The best way to get what you needed, if your soldiers needed things, was to go to the other departments and talk to them and get to know them. It's all about relationships then, I guess.
All about relationships and relationships with the people that are off camera, your producers, the production team in the office, incredibly important to everything I do because they are ahead of the game. They are making the decisions about where we're going to be, getting locations set up. If you actually need some equipment, especially if you're on location, especially if you're in a third world on location, where if something goes awry with one of the pieces of equipment and you didn't bring backup, which I always did, but things happen. You need to know the editing team, especially the editing team, because they're relying on your notes and you want to serve them. You're serving three departments. You're serving the producers, the production team. You're serving the director, which is what most people think is the most important serve, which I would say is true. But if you don't serve the editors, then they're not getting your full capacity as a script supervisor. They're not getting the gems they need in post-production when you're long gone. You're on another show. They need your notes.
It seems like a script supervisor wears a lot of hats in the same way that, say, a first sergeant or a senior enlisted person does in a unit. I always thought that script supervisors dealt primarily with the script, but it seems like you're putting out fires for the director, and maybe the good script supervisors are leaning forward and seeing problems in other departments on the set before they happen. But it almost seems like a script supervisor should be called like a pre-editor.
There are many ways to do the job, and there are many different medias that you do the job. So, for example, if they were doing a 3-camera show like, Friends or Cheers, that's a completely different job as a script supervisor. I wouldn't even begin to understand exactly what they do. They cut everything in the booth. It's a very different thing. I worked in film. TV is very much like the film, although they work faster. And we used to say a lot of times they hose it down. I worked on a show. I won't mention the show right now. That would be rude. But I worked on a show in which we had 2 cameras that were just constantly doing this. Just shoot whatever we can shoot. We'll do a bunch of takes and hope that we get everything in the can. And Susie's going to let us know to make sure that every single line is covered. I did not like that way of shooting. So I'm going to talk about film because that's my love. That's where I lived for 40 some odd years. As I said, you cover 3 different departments. For production, I'm spending my time doing all the paperwork in terms of statistics. I'm tracking everything from our call time, what time we got our first shot, how many setups we did before lunch, what time we broke for lunch, how long lunch was, what time we came back, what time the first shot was. At the end of the day, I'm putting down how many scenes did we complete, did we finish our work, how many pages did we do, how many setups did we have. The list is endless of statistics, and it runs to the studio because the studio is looking at money. It's all about money, and they want to know, was my money spent correctly? Not just well spent, but correctly. I expect this amount of work to get done. I expect it to be done in this amount of hours. The ADs are tracking, did the actors go out on time? Are we in overtime? It's very complicated, and my paperwork drives a lot of that information, drives the payroll in a lot of respects. People put in a time card, and they're looking back at my production sheet saying, well, she says they wrapped at such and such. Why are they putting themselves out 2 hours later? It's all about money. That's one aspect of my job, and it has to be done correctly. It has to be done efficiently and on time. The second part of my job is to the editors. I'm taking notes. I'm tracking everything that we're shooting, anything that goes onto film. They want to know exactly what it is. Again, because like I said, I'm long gone once they're cutting, and they need to see what it is. What did we shoot? How many takes did we do? Were there prints? In the old days with film, everything that was printed went to the lab. It was all about money. Now it's digital. Everything is printed, but they still want to know, I like this take better. This take had a problem. This take, lots of complicated things. But the main thing I'm doing is I'm sitting next to the director. In the old days, my God, I'm not that old, but in the old days, before we had video, I sat next to the director who sat next to the lens, and we were looking at everything that was being filmed, and I was listening to all the things that he was saying, sometimes during, but usually after. I like this, I didn't like that, use the top of this scene, I like that particular line, that's a great reaction, but it can be used later, doesn't have to be used here, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm noting all this, again, because when he gets into the editing room 3 months down the line, he's not going to remember everything that happened on the set. No matter how brilliant they are, there's just such a vast amount of information that's coming every day. So that's why the notes are so valuable. But my job is also to watch everything else that goes on the set. I'm watching props. I'm watching costumes. I'm watching the set. Did the door open? Did it stay open? When that person went over to open the window, was it on this line? Was it on that line? Did they stand up on the same line every take when they're saying such and such a line? Because we shoot a master and then we shoot a close-up and then we shoot 2 shots. All of it has to be equally in continuity. And that's my job.
That is amazing. What do you think makes a good script supervisor?
I think there are a lot of different things. And, again, it really depends on who's hiring you. I remember interviewing for a job and the director said to me, I don't need anything but a note taker. And I said, then you don't need me, because you can hire millions of people who are note takers. I want to be involved with all of the pieces of information. I want to be able to say things if I see something that I think is going to be a problem for you. And if you're not interested in it, hire somebody else. Because I really wanted, one of the things I loved about script supervising was I was part of the team. And I worked with the same directors many, many, many movies. And it was because we had that kind of a relationship where she wanted to hear whatever I had to say. I was prudent. It wasn't an opinion in terms of, I don't like this or whatever. It's more about, is it serving your vision? Is it serving what we planned on that day? Is it matching? Can it all be used in the editing room, et cetera? And of course, the closer relationship I have with certain people, the more they turn to me and ask sometimes even aesthetic questions more than just the technical stuff. How meticulous are you with your notes? One of the reasons I loved working in paper and pencil and never transitioned to computer, which is almost all the script supervisors are doing now, was because I like to plot out every single setup. I like to on the page, to draw the set, the camera angles, how many cameras were there, the crosses, et cetera. It was so wonderful because when I came back to recreate, maybe we came back to do a close-up that they weren't happy with, maybe we needed an insert, maybe there was something that was awry, and we came back 3 months later. Oh, I'll give you an example. On Platoon, the hooch scene with Tom Berenger and Charlie, when they come in, I think it's the last hooch scene to have this whole confrontation. There were things about it that Oliver wasn't happy about, and it's the only thing that he rewrote 3 times, done, locked in. He knew what he wanted. But this had certain little things that he just wanted to change. We couldn't go back and shoot it in the same location because by this time we'd moved on. We were shooting the film in continuity. So by this time we'd long since left that location. The hooch had been disassembled and it was made out of rice bags. It was supposed to look like sandbags, but in fact they were using rice, which by the way meant that we had bugs everywhere because they loved to eat the rice. Really awful. It was really awful. So the second time they rebuilt the hooch. Well, by this time, a lot of the props were missing and the rice bags were not quite in the exact formation because it's a rice bag. And we did this 3 times. And the third time was even more different. And I'm saying to Oliver, it doesn't match. This is missing. He said, you'll never notice. You'll never notice.
We didn't.
And no. And you know what? I know what to look for, but ostensibly it looks the same. But in truth, that hooch had different shapes for all 3. Yeah, it wasn't exactly the same. And we were certainly missing props.
Well, over the career, what are some of the things that you think have made you better? What are the big lessons that you learned that you could pass on to somebody else?
I certainly learned what was important to watch and what wasn't. I really had to start prioritizing what was the most important thing to watch when I'm watching a master with that many people and that much business. And I really learned either it was because a certain person was driving the scene, the action was driving it, the dialogue was driving it. I always knew that a master is really to set the geography, that most directors were never going to stay in the master very long. They were going to use it to set up the geography, set up the positions of the people, maybe use it for some crosses in the action. But ostensibly, they were going to go in for close-ups. But that's not true of most of the directors I've worked for. I knew we were going to go in for coverage. And if it was really tricky, for example, I did a movie called What About Bob with Bill Murray.
With Bill Murray.
He is so creative and so spontaneous and so out there. So, I could never guess what he was going to do. He was busy doing all kinds of improv, et cetera. And in some scenes, it was very easy to work around it, but there were other scenes that were very difficult. And we had a dinner scene in which everybody was eating. There were, I think, maybe 6 people around the table. And I finally went to the director and I said, you got to do singles on him. You just have to, because he eats corn on the cob and then he drinks and then he uses a fork and then he uses a spoon and then he picks up the chicken. And I said, I can't track it. I don't know what you're going to use to cut with, and you need to do singles with him. You need to be able to have something that is just Bill that you can use for what we call a cutaway. And in fact, that's what he did.
I've heard that about it, because he came from what? Did he come from Second City first, and then he did Saturday Night, and then he went to the films? Because so he's an improv guy. So I guess your approach would have to be different for different actors. Like, you told me a great story about Gene Hackman one time. Do you remember that story?
Oh gosh, and I was so sorry to see Gene.
I know.
I always tell this story when I teach because it's so informative for so many departments. I was doing a movie called Full Moon and Blue Water with Terry Garr, Burgess Meredith, and Gene Hackman. And we had been working for a while in this set. The movie takes place almost entirely on one set. It's a big bar, huge room, long bar, a little hallway, and then a teeny tiny kitchen that's kind of tucked away. And the rest of the room was all windows looking out on Galveston Bay, or whatever bay it was in that area. I would watch Galveston and I would watch these big tankers come through, and all of a sudden the water would be up like 6 feet. And then the water would be gone when it left. And we're shooting with Burgess at the beach. And I'm saying to the director, the water's not matching, because Burgess, you can see his feet. And then the next shot, he's up to here in water. It's the most bizarre thing. Because these big tankers display so much water. Who knew? I wasn't thinking of it. Yeah, so funny. But anyway, so here's this big bar on the bay. And I'm used to watching all the action. Gene's, usually pouring, because he's the bartender. He owns a bar. He's pouring drinks. He's doing various things. So this particular cameraman, we call him DPs, Directors of Photography, took a fair amount of time lighting. I'm going to be polite about this, but we could sit for a long time. And so it was for me. And again, this is because it was film, not digital. So everything had to be lit. I'm sitting on my little stool in a little corner. I'm doing my notes. And I notice that Gene has tucked himself away in the kitchen doing something. And of course, anything I can learn about what actors are doing during rehearsal helps me when we film. Even though they may change stuff, at least I have an idea of maybe what's planned, so that I can partially relax my nervous system and also be more involved in watching and making sure the lines are correct along with the action. Okay, so I kind of steeled myself over to have a look. And there's Gene, and he's making sandwiches. There's a little bit of a side table thing, a little countertop. And here he is. He puts the bread down. And then he puts lettuce down, and then he puts tomatoes down. And then I see him do this. He puts everything away, and he starts again. There's the bread, there's the lettuce, and then it's a little mayo, etc. And I watch him for probably 45 minutes, I would say. We were there a long time, until he was doing it exactly the same every single time. He had a routine. He knew exactly where he was going to put the bread and where the mayo, what he was going to do with a knife, etc. I didn't see him talking, didn't see him say anything to anyone or even run lines. He was simply doing action and repeating it. And we finally, AD says, we're ready, let's go. And he comes out onto the set, and we begin the scene, and he's talking to, I don't even remember who the actor was he was talking to. And there he is, bread, 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 mayo, 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 lettuce, tomato. And every single take was the exact same action. And okay, you can look at it and go, oh, well, Susie's so lucky. Script Supervisor doesn't have to worry about it. I think the bigger takeaway is Gene didn't need to worry about it. Gene could just relax. I'm sure it's the same thing when you fly. You fly because it's part of your body. You know everything that you're doing. You've done it so much that your job is to do whatever it is. Watch the instruments, watch the sky. I don't know. I don't fly. But it's got to be in your body what you're doing. And then he could just do the lines, and he could do the emotion, and he could deliver every single take with little nuances, beautiful choices in the editing room, and everything would match. What a lesson
What a
in
pro.
in recognizing that film is a technical medium. It is not just about emoting. You need to know where the light is. You need to know where to stand and the T mark on the floor that you do for the focus puller so that you can always be in focus. Another story. Want another story?
Yeah, I'd love it. Come on.
Okay, so
Hey everybody, I want to take a quick second to thank my friends at Phantom Products for believing in Make the Donuts, sponsoring this first season. They're powering us, and on top of that, they've powered some amazing lighting applications. Since 1943, they've been providing lighting to the military. They used to light the shipping lanes for military transports during World War II. They provided lights to the New York Police Department, the New York Fire Department, and first responders all over this country. They're family owned, they're American made. When I was in Afghanistan and Iraq, I was using this Phantom TLS, and it's an awesome light. It's got covert, secure white, it's got cyan, it's got infrared, it's got these built-in flash patterns if you need it. In a roundabout way, without this light, there's some people in this world that probably wouldn't be here. So I want to thank Phantom Products again for believing in the show, for sponsoring us, and for the great stuff you guys make. Check out the website. We'll drop it down in the show notes. And again, Phantom Products, thanks for helping us make the donuts.
I'm doing this film with Jean-Claude Van Damme in Pittsburgh. It's a hockey movie, Jean-Claude saves the day. And we had filmed Jean-Claude's close-up. He was on one side of the rink. He was standing in the stands. We had filmed nice, tight close-up, blah, blah, blah. Now we've turned the camera around, and he's off camera, and he's going to react to a local hire, a young man. He's going to, stadiums are huge, right? So there's a doorway. He bolts out of the doorway. He runs all the way down the aisle thing, and then he gets to stairs, and he runs down 2 long flights of stairs, and he gets to where he's supposed to be, and he blurts out the line, looking at Jean-Claude. One line, most important, whatever, like, oh my God, the bad guy, or whatever it is. We're ready to roll. And we roll, and he bolts out of the door, and he runs down. Cut. It's not in focus. So the director says, okay, let's go again. And the guy runs back, bolts out of the roll camera, bolts out a door, runs down the stair, yada, 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 yada. Cut. It's not in focus. And the director says, forget it. Let's move on. I'll stay on Jean-Claude. I'll loop the line in post. And I don't have time for this. And I realize what's happened. And I turned to the director and I said, I don't think the guy knows where to hit the mark and where to look, whatever it was. And he looks at me and I don't have time for this. I said, please, just give me one more chance. Please. Poor little guy. He's a local hire, first time on a movie, yada, yada. So he says, okay, you got 1 minute. And I ran all the way around to the stadium and I went over to the young man and I said, we're on 150 mil, like this. You've got to hit your mark, stay stock still and say the line. You can't move because there's no wiggle room and you're only going to get one chance. The kid says, okay. I run back. I said, okay, we're ready to go. Roll camera, hit the sticks, action. And the kid runs out of the thing and tears down the stairs, hits his mark, stands perfectly still, says the line, perfect, cut, print, move on. And the kid comes over to me while we're changing camera, moving whatever we're doing for the next setup. And he says, thank you so much. I didn't know. It's a technical medium. And your job as an actor is to understand all the things that you can do to make sure that whatever you do as your performance ends up in the cut and not on the cutting room floor. And that's because you need to know your key light. You know not how to block the light from somebody else. You need to know how to hit your mark. You need to know how to match your action. And if you're like Gene, spend time making a plan for your props. I have a wonderful friend, Jeff DeMunn. He played Paul Giamatti's father on Billions. If you ever saw the show, he's wonderful in it. And he's been around for many years. Fabulous actor. I've done a lot of movies with him. And Jeff will tell you the exact same thing. He knows what he wants to do with the props. He knows why he's using it. He knows why he chose it, what he's going to do. So he never has to worry about it. He can just do the performance and everything's going to match. And when you look at his work, you can see what a total pro.
Wow, we call that chair flying in aviation. You literally fly every mission in your room at night before you fly it. So it's all automatic and you can concentrate and see the big picture. But I'm going to be a little bit biased because I know that Gene was a Marine.
Yes.
I wonder if some of that military discipline is what didn't allow him to get up from the set and go get a cup of coffee. He just had to continuously do those things. But I don't
Yeah.
want to put you on the spot then. But who is one actor in particular you think that is technically excellent on set?
Well, Tom Hanks knows everything about making movies. He's such a pro. I've done 3 movies with him. He always comes prepared. He knows his lines. He's done all the homework in terms of his character. It's just such a pleasure to, especially when we did Sully, and I know that you can appreciate this. He and Aaron spent a lot of time in the simulators learning exactly what it was that Sully and his first mate did. I never had to worry about any matching of anything in the plane. They knew exactly. They could have flown. It was pretty amazing.
Oh no, as an Airbus pilot, I watched that movie and it's spot on. Everything absolutely makes sense. It's just not the things they said. It's the way they move their body to reach those switches. It's clearly right out of the instructions that you get when you're getting your type rating on it. So kudos to them.
Yeah. And the other thing that was really interesting, I think I probably have told you this before. When we did the sim scenes, they hired 6 pilots from, I guess it was from United, because that's, of course, the plane that went down, and that is...
U.S. Air, actually.
U.S. Air. And
you had Lori Klein, who was our head of training when I came to American. She's since left American, but yeah, absolutely.
And we were at the Sims in Charlotte. So that would be the UA Sims, right?
Yeah, I just did those Sims about 2 weeks ago. I did my recording there.
There you go. So we had the simulations that they reacted to that were what they were supposed to do in landing in Teterboro and landing in LaGuardia, et cetera. And then we ran the sim with the crash. And every single pilot who came out afterwards said it was deeply disturbing because they don't watch those kind of videos. Really felt for them. I really felt how bad that must have been. It was disturbing for us to watch. And we were just filming it. But it was so interesting to see the Sims, again, because when you work on location on a movie, what amazing things. I've worked Ford auto plants. I've worked in the Pittsburgh Pirates old stadium with the Pirates when we did a baseball movie. I mean, I've been on junks in Hong Kong. I mean, I could just go on and on. The Spanish Steps in Rome. All these amazing things. Well, the Sims, they look like big caterpillars. Who knew? I mean, who sees this? Nobody sees it. And you see these things, these big Xy things waving while I'm down here watching a video. It was so wild.
When is your book coming out? It's amazing. If I've got a chance to read this book, or at least in the rough draft, and it is fantastic. If you're out there and you're looking for a great property, you've got to grab this because it's awesome. It's such a cool background view of how a film was made. I mean, it's literally all these cool anecdotal things. I mean, if you like watching the making of, Suze, you got to put your book out.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'll work on that.
Okay, so let's change the direction here. We'll give you a vector on this one. Favorite movie you ever worked on and why?
Oh, that is really, really hard. I mean, it's funny. We just had a 40-year reunion. Well, it's 39-year technically year reunion of Platoon. We went to the Phoenix Film Festival, and a couple of the actors, a couple of the crew, Oliver, it's our technical advisors, Dale was there, Mark Ebenhock was there. I hate to compare it to people in the military because it's really not fair, but it is as close, I suspect, as I would ever get. These people who I, was in the jungle with for almost 4 months with nobody else, went through. Oliver says, really? Was it that hard? I didn't know I put you through so much, Susan. Yeah, right. These are lifelong friends, people I consider my brothers. So in that regard, I'm terribly, terribly, terribly connected to that. But I have movies that I've worked on that were little movies that nobody ever saw that I had an amazing experience. The movie I met my husband on in Hong Kong that nobody ever saw. We were there during Tiananmen Square, so Hong Kong was just a bed of, revolution and politics, and it was extraordinary time to be in an amazing city. And then, of course, I met David, which was ever so special, lifelong. We're married almost 30 years. I mean, I had fun on things like Nancy Drew, and I had fun. I loved making Sully. I liked working with Clint. That was a really interesting experience. Anything that Frank does, I love because he's a dear friend and he's so talented. And he uses the same crew every single time, so it's family. I love that. Sometimes it's the locations, even though it may be a really lousy movie. I hate to say it,
Okay. Well, that's good. That was going to be my next question. Who's your favorite director?
I got to say Frank because I love him. But, I will say also, I loved working with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The first movie I did with him, he was a director. And he said to me, Susie, as he was saying, I'm such a forehead. That's his favorite line. You have to teach me everything and, really have my back. And he was so respectful and so inclusive in everything that we did. And we did a really quick movie. I think we shot it in 22 days. It was with Tony Curtis, Chris Christopherson, Diane Cannon. And I had a wonderful time. And of course, I fell in love with Arnold and did 3 other movies with him. So that was really, really special.
Imagine yourself, you're sitting in a restaurant in Los Angeles or Venice. A young person comes up to you and says, Susan, I can't believe it's you. I want to be a script supervisor. What do you tell that person?
Even before I tell them what to do, I ask them a lot of questions. Do you mind being dirty? Do you mind being cold? Do you mind being hot? Do you mind being yelled at? Do you have good stamina? Can you deal with a lot of egos? I mean, I really go through the list of all the things, as simple as, do you have to go to the bathroom every hour or 2? Because you will not be even off the set for a minimum of 6 hours every day. It's a very physical job. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, if you will, too. You are answerable to a lot of people, but nobody really knows what you do for your job. They don't know how you do it. They don't understand how you do it. And so you have to be a self-starter. You have to really thick skin, I think, to be a very good diplomat. And I always believe you need to have the spirit of being a service, that you want to help people. You want to make everybody feel like not only are you a team player, but you're the biggest fan. You're really rooting for everybody's success. To go on the set every morning and say good morning to everybody and to be extremely grateful that you have this extraordinary opportunity to have a really amazing career. If you can't be that, you should not be this, because you're going to be yelled at all the time by all kinds of people. You have camera guys who don't like you, operators who will not help you. You'll have producers who don't understand what you do, who stand in front of the video, the monitor and want to schmooze when you're doing your job. You'll have actors who sit in your chair, which is totally rude, but that's what they do. Your chair is your office, but you have to then know that sometimes you can't even politely ask them to move because they're the 900-pound gorilla. You'll have directors who are under extraordinary pressure every day, all day long, who take it out on you because you're the person sitting next to them. You're going to have actors and actresses who are extraordinarily insecure. Maybe they don't know their lines. Sometimes they're drunk. You have to bend with all of this because nobody wants to know what your problem is. They just want you to be the problem solution. So if you can't be that person, then we're not even going to have this conversation. If the next step is, oh my, I've got to do this job, I love it, then I say, read Pat Miller's book. You can find it on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. It's a paperback. Read the book. And then the next thing is do your homework. Look around. If you don't know anybody in the industry who maybe could pass on some names or even kindly teach you for free, then I would say look around. There are a lot of people on the internet who are teaching. Listen closely. If you've read the book first, then I think you'll have a better idea of who's teaching what and who you think would best serve what you need to learn, because not all teachers are as good as some, it's given, right? I'm sure. Yeah, whatever. I'm passing no names on. I don't do that. And then, if you know anybody in the business and they can be kind enough to say, come onto the set for a day and watch them work, even if they're not script supervisors. I got on the set of Cannery Row because of the person who actually introduced me to Betty. And it was just amazing because although I wanted to watch the script supervisor most of the day, I watched everybody. I really wanted to see how does That was a huge movie, big budget. What was it like to be on the set? What was it like to, what were the machinations, all the things that I had been told, but really needed to see in work. And then the other thing is do student films. You must do student films because they're all learning too. It's the place to make mistakes. Even if somebody's not happy with your mistake, they're making mistakes too. You need to get the work in your bones. You need to feel so comfortable that when you finally are lucky enough to get your first job, you know the workings. You understand what's going on and you're comfortable with what you do for a job. And I will tell you too that because I did a lot of student films, that's how I met all the people coming up in the business. We all came up together. Oh, so-and-so called me and said, hey, I heard about this job, yada, yada. Why don't you call them? Which I did. That's it. It's a numbers game. You got to kiss 99 frogs before you find your prince. You got to go out there and just put yourself out over and over and over again. One day, if you're good, if you're nice, if you're a team player, if you're a hard worker, if you show up early, because early is on time and on time is late. You never want to be late, ever, 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 ever. And you show gratitude and, do the best you can to be a friendly person. People will hire you over and over and over again. And I will tell you, in all honesty, it's not always possible. I have people who probably will never work with me again. I did the best I could, and I felt they made my life misery, and I guess they thought I did too. And so, it is what it is, right? Can't get along with everybody, but you do your best. You do your best.
It's such a parallel to what we do in aviation. You basically, if you're a good person and you do the work and you show up on time, and the folks that start off with you in the lower levels, they eventually work their way up, and that's pretty much how you get to a legacy airline. Okay, here's one last question, and maybe you've been waiting to answer this one your whole life, but a young actor or actress comes to you and says, I love acting. I don't know. I went to college. I majored in theater. I don't know anything about film. How do I become a good film actor?
I mean, first you have to do all the work you need to be an actor. I'm really kind of sadly amazed at so many people who come in who think it's all about emoting. But the problem is, can you sustain the emoting all day, all week, for 7 months? I mean, to really have done your preparation, to know the arc of your character, not just to know your lines, but to really have a plan. We were doing The Majestic with Martin Landau, and we were doing one scene in the village and one scene at the cemetery. And the cemetery needed, if I can remember correctly, the cemetery needed sun and the village needed shade. And we were shooting in Ferndale and the sun kept changing. And we literally were doing this all day, all week. Sun out, we'd run up to the cemetery, we'd try to get a shot. Shades out, boom, we'd go back to the village. And the first day that happened, the cemetery was not on the schedule. And Marty was such a trooper, and he went up, he had a long monologue, went up and, did his job because he was ready. Things change really fast on a dime. So as an actor, you need to know this is a technical medium. You need to have the skill as an actor, hopefully that you've learned from theater, because I think that's the best proving ground. And then maybe take some camera classes, take some classes where you can learn some of the technical. There are classes out there for actors to do that. You can do some reading of books. What I say to script supervisors, and I'm sure you could do this as an actor too, choose a TV show that's a procedural, a 1 hour legal, whatever, ER, something like that. Turn the volume off so that you're not listening to the dialogue and you're not distracted by the action, and watch the work. Watch the camera angles, watch the editing, how tight, how loose it is. Look for the light. Watch the technical of what's going on, and you'll start to see, that didn't match, or they didn't do this, or just to get a sense of the mechanics of what a show is. And TV is a really good place to do that because it's very methodical. They pretty much master over the shoulder, close up, etc. So you need to know the language. If somebody says to the actor, listen, we're going to start over here and we're going to pan, and when we pan over to you, we're going to pick you up and you're going to be walking. I need you to step here. This is where the light is. Please don't block, yada, yada. I'm going to go to the over the shoulder. The steady cam is going to come around. You need to know what they're saying.
In aviation, there's a book that everyone knows called Everything Explained for the Professional Pilot. And it's full of cartoons and pictures, and it's kind of considered to be like, that's the book. Is there a book for production as well that you could recommend?
Well, that's my second book that's also not published.
Well, then that is the book you got to publish next. But I want the one with platoon first. Susan, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If you want to learn how to make the donuts as a script supervisor, I highly recommend you rewind this and watch it again. If you know somebody who wants to get involved in this field, you've got to turn them on to this episode. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Any other bits of advice or wisdom for would-be script supervisors?
Well, I'll say this to everybody who works in film, because it's not just for script supervisors, especially for directors. You know, it's a gift. You are extraordinarily lucky for someone as a director to give you money, or as an actor to trust that you will do the work. Please be prepared and show some gratitude, not necessarily to the crew, although that would be very nice, but to understand not to take it for granted, because most directors, maybe if they're lucky, what will they get? 5, 6 movies in a career? My husband did over 250 movies in his career. You know, we go from job to job to job to job, but that's not true necessarily for actors or for editors or for directors, producers. So you're very blessed. We're there to support you. We really want you to make the very best film, and I hope that you know that about us. And, you know, once in a while, just a thank you would be really nice.
Well, for a storyteller to share her story with us, we're pretty lucky to have Susan. You're an absolute angel. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's always great to see you. We're going to talk off camera. You guys can't hear that because I got to ask her stuff that you're not allowed to know. But in the meantime, if you want to make the donuts in any kind of field, make sure you like, subscribe, check us out on all the socials. And until then, have a good one. We'll talk soon.